We're here on page Chaf Beis. On the bottom right, Matir Mefagil Es Hanitar. And we're trying to get a little bit more of an insight into the mechanics of Pigul. And we're always asking the basic question, going back to basics, during which avodos is there a machshavas Pigul? Meaning, does the operation, the mechanics of machshavas Pigul operate? And now we're defining it as an avoda hamateres. And we're going to try to take that general category called avoda hamateres and break it down into its component parts or its membership cases. Now, another dimension of our discussion is when he's involved in one avoda and he has a machshava vis-a-vis another avoda. So, for example, we have chishe bezrika lahatir seimurim chutz l'zman chutz koma. So he has a machshava during zrika v'haktara. And zrika is a matir for haktara, which means that the mizbeach is not fed, so to speak, until after zrika. Well, if he has a machshavas pigul of chutz zman or chutz koma during the zrika, and he's thinking about the haktara, that the haktara should be chutz zman, that itself generates pigul. Why? Because you have an avoda materes and a machshav of chutz zman. Once you combine A plus B equals C equals P. However, Hishe b'shas avoda acheres la'asosa shelo kedina v'yeina avoda she'osek ba matiras avoda she'chishe ba. See, zrika is related directly to Aktara, and Zrika is a matir of Aktara. So machshava during Zrika for Aktara qualifies as Pigul because of that interrelationship between matir and nita. Zrika is the matir, and Aktara is the nita. But what happens in a case where there's one avoda, and he's thinking about a chutz zman or chutz koma for a different avoda that has nothing to do with the first avoda, meaning it's not a matir nita relationship. Here's the example. In Menachos, he had a machshava during the Aktoras HaKometz vis-a-vis the Levona. And we've already discussed in the past that in Menachos, we have two Haktoras. We have Haktora the Kometz and Haktora of the Levona. However, there's no relationship between the Kometz and the Levona. They're two independent Haktoras, two obligations, two mitzvahs that are independent one of the other. One is called Haktoras HaKometz, the other is Haktoras HaLevona. The only relationship between the two is one of sequence. So he does the Haktoras HaKometz first, and then the Haktoras HaLevona second. But the Haktoras HaLevona, even in the absence of Haktoras HaKometz, is still a mitzvah. It stands on its own as an independent mitzvah. And therefore, the relationship between Haktoras HaKometz and Haktoras HaLevona is not a relationship of matir and nita. Ein Haktoras HaKometz matiras Haktoras HaLevona. You can theoretically change around the sequence. You can even start with Haktoras HaLevona and then do the Haktoras HaKometz. And that severs the interdependence as a matir nita relationship between Kometz and Levona. And therefore, according to one shita in the Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah in the Masechta Menachos, if he had a machshava during the komets for a chutz l'zman or chutz l'komo of the levona, it would not generate pigul, because pigul is restricted, or what word am I looking for? Is singled out for a machshava during a matir for a chutz l'zman or chutz l'komo of a nita, like zrika and aktara. But in the case of aktaras hakomets and aktaras halavona, a machshava during komets is not related to the lavona, even though he's thinking about the lavona. And he makes that declaration that I'm going to be maktir the lavona chutz zman or chutz koma. But nevertheless, that declaration has to come within and simultaneous with a framework. In this case, within the context of the avoda that is matir then. So, like, for example, obviously there's no machshavas pigul when he's doing nothing. Let's say, he's preparing the korban and he has a machshava that'll be matir chutz zman chutz koma. That's worthless. There's only a machshavas pigul during avoda, and now we're whittling it down even further. It's got to be machshavas pigul during avoda X that's matir avoda Y. So he has a machshava for Y during X. He has let's fill it in the flesh. He has a machshava for aktoras hamizbeach chutz zman chutz komo. But at what point, at what moment did he have that machshava? He had it at the moment of zrika, and that's called pigul. Why? Because that is a moment of machshavas hamatir, avoda materis. Now let's ask the following question. We've always said many times that machshavas pigul applies during any of the four avodas, starting from shchita and ending with zrika. But if the machshava has to be a machshava materes, we know and we understand full well that zrika is an avoda materes. But shchita, kabbalah, and halacha are not avodos hamatiros, I should say. So let's say during shchita he had a machshava of aktoras haimurim chutz zman chutz koma. Now we don't have a relationship between shchita and aktoras haimurim l'chora. So it's not a matir and a nita relationship. He says no. There is a where do I look for? Not hierarchy. Find another word. Again, this might be meaningless to you, but in sociology, there's something called a patriarchal society, and there's something called a matriarchal society. What it means is that there's a father figure, and that parent sort of controls the whole family. And in the dynamics of the family, it's a patriarchal society. The four avodos are also part of a patriarchal society. What is the father? Which of the avodos? There are four avodos. Which plays the role of the father, such that all the other avodos are integrated under that category of one specific avodah. Which one do I have in mind? Zrika. So we have a patriarchal system of avodah in which zrika swallows up, so to speak, all the other avodas. The other avodas are like tfelos, are in a sense secondary and swallowed up by zrika. Zrika is the overriding malacha, creates an umbrella that encompasses all the avodas from from shchita to halacha. And therefore, to our surprise, a machshavas pigul during shchita, for example, to be maktir the murim on the mizbeach chutz zmano chutz koma, or to be ochel lebasar akarban chutz zmano chutz will generate pigul, even though there's no matir nita relationship. And that's because the shchita is swallowed up under this umbrella organization called Zrika. And just like in Zrika, we said Zrika is a matir, generates a machshavas pigul faktoras haimurim, which is the nitar. And if he has a machshava during the matir of Zrika for the nitar of aktora to take place, it generates pigul, so too in a machshavas pigul during shchita, or for that matter, kabbalah sadam or halacha sadam, or a aktora or an achila chutzis mano, that generates pigul. And why? Mishum shehein bichlal avodas hadam. We give them a status of avodas hadam. It's like an av and a tolda, right? The tolda has the status equal to the av. And Kabbalah, Shchita, Kabbalah, etc., have the status of being, what does he call it? Nichlal, the avodas hadam. Now we get to Shvichas Shirayim. Give me a second here. He says, "He efshar lechashe b'shvichas shirayim ve'aktoras emurim she'enon avodos hama'akvos kapara." Now, 1 second. Let's just turn back. Was it page Chaf Aleph where we spoke about shirayim? Oh, there it was. Chaf Aleph on the left side. He writes that machshavas pigul higam im chishev al shvichas shirayim chutz zman al chutz kol. This is really fascinating, and let's see if we can understand it. If during one of the avodos, starting from shchita and ending with zrika, he had a machshav that the shvichas shirayim should be chutz zman or chutz komo, that generates pigul. But if during the shvichas shirayim he has a machshavas pigul, we have to know a little bit more about the sequence of the avodos. But be that as it may, we're talking about a scenario in which he finished the zrika, he has a vestige of shirayim in the mizrach, and now he pours it on the yisod hamizbeh. He hasn't yet been maktir the murim, nor has he given the respective people who can eat the korban, they haven't eaten the korban. So he has, at the moment of shvichas shirayim, as a machshava, that the basar should be eaten chutz zman or chutz kol. Also meaning either aktara or achilas, whoever, kohanim, bailam, whatever. Why is it that during Zrika, if he has a machshava of achilas chutzes chutzes koma generates pigul, but if during shvichas hashirayim he has such a machshava that the basar should be nechal chutzes chutzes koma, that does not engender pigul. And he answers because shvicha shirayim is not a critical avodah. And if the dam gets lost or becomes tamei, and there's no possibility of shvicha shirayim, the carbon still remains kosher. But what's fascinating is that only defines pigul at the moment of the avodah. But if at the moment of a different avodah, he has the same machshava in mind vis-a-vis the shirayim, then it does generate pigul. And you don't say, wait a minute, shirayim is not ma'akiv the korban. You hear my question, my problem? The two scenarios are the following. One scenario is that during the Zrika he has in mind the Shvicha Shirayim Chutzes Mano. The other scenario is where during Shvicha Shirayim he has in mind that the Basar should be Nechal Chutzes Mano. In the latter case, there's no pigul. In the former case, there is. And I'm trying to figure out, in the light of this Svara, that Eno Ma'akeves Es HaKapara, we should say in both cases there's no pigul. So apparently we have here at Tzvei Dina. When you're talking about which avodos qualify for a machshavas pigul, then you're limited to an avoda that's ma'akeves hakapor, to the exclusion of shvicha shirayim or haktaras eimur. So a machshav of chutzes komo during shvicha shirayim, which is not ma'akev hakapor, or during haktaras eimur, which is not ma'akev hakapor, is not a candidate for an avoda that lends itself to a machshavas. But now let's go to the second bit. We have an avoda that is absolutely critical for the kapara. Let's take Zrika. And he has in mind during Zrika that the Shirayim he'll pour in Yenemsveld or tomorrow, I don't know when, but Chutzes Mana Chutzes Kol. So we're not going to say, well, wait a second, Shirayim is not ma'akiv, Haktor is not ma'akiv, so drop the ball. There's no pigul. What we're going to say is that during the avoda that qualifies, because it's an avoda ma'akeves es hakapara, a machshav of chutzes mana chutzim komo vis-a-vis another dimension of the avodas hakarma, which is not critical, generates pigul. The power of machshava during an avoda ma'akeves is so great that all we need is that machshava should somehow relate to chutzes mana chutzim kom. When you're dealing with the issue of which avoda lends itself to a machshavas pigul, you need an avoda ma'akeves. But when you have an avodah makeves, and you've already checked off that box, then any machshava that you have of chutzim zman or chutzim komo, even vis-a-vis an avodah she'ein makeves, will generate people. The only thing that bothers me is that, is there a matir and a nita? Let's just think about this. In other words, what I'm bothered by is the following premise that I would have operated with. Apparently is incorrect, but I don't know why. My premise would have been that after Shechita and he's got Dam in the Mizrach, that Dam in the Mizrach divides up into two. There's Dam for the Mizbeach, for Zrika, and then there's Dam for Shirayim, for Shvicha Shirayim. And just like in the case that we had of Kometz and Levona, each Haktorah is independent, and therefore you cannot have a Machshavas Pigel during Kometz vis-a-vis Levona. So too, there are two different avodos that I do with the Dam. One is Rik al Gabi Mizbeach, and the other is Shvich al Gabi Yisod. And those should be equated with Levona and Kometz, which are two independent avodos. We said that there's no machshavas pigul during Kometz for Levona. So why is there a machshavas pigul during Zrika for Shvichas Adam? How is it different than Kometz and Levona? Meaning there's no mater and nita relationship. Ishev Odas Kabbalah V'Halacha Ze Machshavas Pigul. So both say again, let's go back to that paragraph. I'm certainly not convinced that I understand this paragraph. We're back on Chaf Aleph, on the left column, Machsheves Pigul al Shfichas Shirayim. Machsheves Pigul, he gam im Chishev al Shfichas Shirayim, Lasosam Chutz Lizmano or Chutz Limkom. Ach im Chishev al Avodas Kabbalah Beholach Ein Ze Machsheves Pigul. What's the case? Well, what's the mitzvah here? Iche balavodas holacha. Does he mean during Shvita? What's going on here? Iche balavodas holacha. I don't know. I thought it meant that during Shvita he has a machshava on Kabbalah V'Alach. Now I'm not sure that's what he means. And he writes, "Shvicha Shirayim B'chlal Azrika." Gam achilas mizbeach. What does he have here in footnote tough? Yes. It's shown in Machshov Af Alavoda in Mavur arrived. Also was a Machshava Kimaisi. The whole name Machshava was Rika. Gentlemen, are you with me? I'm not getting any help here from my friends. Remember the Beatles? Help from my friends. What's going on here? Chishev al avodas kabbalah v'halacha ein zu machshavas pilu. I mean, the only thing I can come up with is he's talking during Shechita, and he has machshava on Kabbalah. That's not called machshavas pigul because we're going from a machshavas achila to something which is not achila at all. Whereas if during Zrika, for example, you have machshavas pigul on achila chutzes mano, that's because Zrika is the matir of achila. So again, even though a machshavas pigul during Kabbalah, during Holoch, would certainly qualify as a machshavas pigul, that's because these are avodas hama'akvos. Any avodah that's ma'akivus hakapara is a candidate for machshavas pigul. Shvicha shirayim is not a candidate for machshavas pigul. But what we did see here on page Chavbeis is that the reason why Shvicha shirayim is not a candidate for machshavas pigul is because it's not an avodah ma'akivus hakapara. Now he says machshavas pigul higam im chishev al shvicha shirayim. See the word al shvicha shirayim. He doesn't mean during shvicha shirayim. A machshavas pigul during shvicha shirayim we said would not generate pigul because it's not an avodah ma'akivus hakapara. But al shvicha shirayim, which means that he had this machshavas pigul during one of the avodas hama'akvos to do the shvicha shirayim chutzes mano chutzes kol. That does qualify as a machshavas pigul, to create pigul. So shvicha shirayim, as machshava vis-a-vis shvicha shirayim, is it's in the league, in the ballpark. It has membership in the club, the Pigul club, and we can define it as part of Zrika, which is again achilas mizbeach. So that if during Zrika he has machshava, which is malachutz kol and shvicha shirayim, so even though again shvicha shirayim per se would not be ma'akivus hakapara, and it's not a candidate for a machshavas pigul, but if he has machshavas pigul during the Zrika vis-a-vis shvicha shirayim, that would engender pigul, because shvicha shirayim is also feeding the mizbeach, so to speak. Even though it's on the yisoda mizbeach, it's nevertheless considered achilas mizbeach. So if you have a machshava during Zrika for an achilas mizbeach, which is chutzes mano chutzes kol, so during shvicha, that's not a machshava poseles, but about shvicha, and it would be a machshava poseles because shvicha shirayim is classified and defined as achilas mizbeach. But if you had a machshava during shchita for Kabbalah or halacha chutzes mano, that would not engender pigul, even though again a machshava during Kabbalah or halacha would be machshavas pigul, because these are candidates that are ma'akvos hakapara. But about Kabbalah and halacha, that would not generate pigul, because pigul means you have to go from an avoda to another avoda that has to be bichlal achila. And these two avodos of Kabbalah and Allah have nothing to do with achila. That's the best I can do. I hope I did it right. What do you think? Should we take a vote? So where are we up to? Let's just make a note of where we got up to here. We won't pick this up until Son Gedalia. Let's see. Efshar lechashiv gam bavodos shekol lahakir emurim v'lechas abos shebechal avodos adam avodos adam kulam, right? So that we did already, and then we did the next paragraph. So we're up to the left column of Tvilas Etzba Bechatas Primus. Okay, then? That's where we're up to. All right.